The blood-soaked letter trembled in Eliza Montgomery's battered hands as the stagecoach rolled into Redemption Creek, Colorado, her final hope in a journey marked by desperation and fear. The year was 1875, and the unforgiving western frontier had no mercy for a woman alone, especially one fleeing with nothing but the clothes on her back and a promise scrawled on paper. Eliza winced as the coach hit a rut in the dusty road. Every jostle sent pain shooting through her bruised ribs. Her face was a map of violence, a purple swelling beneath her right eye, a split lip crusted with dried blood, and fingerprint bruises around her throat. The other passengers had kept their distance during the 3-day journey from Denver, their sideways glances a mixture of pity and suspicion. Redemption Creek, final stop, the driver called out as the coach slowed. She clutched the letter tighter, her lifeline to salvation. Her sister Jane had written it months ago, describing her new life in this frontier town and extending an invitation that Eliza had initially declined. Now it was her only option. The coach rolled to a stop in front of a dusty main street lined with wooden buildings. Redemption Creek was smaller than Eliza had imagined, a single street with a general store, saloon, small church, and scattered businesses. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the town, which seemed to shimmer in the heat. "Madam, we've arrived," the driver said, opening the door and offering his hand. Eliza hesitated before accepting his help. Her legs wobbled as she stepped down, the world spinning momentarily around her. 3 days with little food and even less sleep had taken their toll. "You all right, madam?" the driver asked, genuine concern in his weathered face. "Yes, thank you," she lied, straightening her soiled blue dress and adjusting the bonnet that partially concealed her bruised face. "Which way to the Montgomery homestead?" The driver's expression changed, his eyes dropping to study the dusty ground. "Miss, I'm afraid." He began, then cleared his throat. There was sickness that swept through last winter. "The Montgomery place is about 2 miles north, but nobody's living there now." The news hit Eliza like a physical blow. Jane was gone. Her sister, her last family, her only hope gone. Her knees buckled, and she clutched the side of the stagecoach to keep from collapsing. "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you," the driver said, awkwardly patting her shoulder. "Sheriff might be able to help you sort things out. His office is just down the street." Eliza nodded numbly, unable to form words. The driver handed down her small carpet bag, all she'd managed to bring with her, and climbed back onto his seat. With a crack of his whip, the stagecoach pulled away, leaving her alone in the street. She stood there, swaying slightly, the letter clutched in her hand. Passers-by gave her curious glances, but kept their distance. In a town this small, a battered woman was a spectacle best avoided. She forced herself to take a step, then another, each movement sending pain shooting through her body. The sheriff's office stood at the end of the street, a modest wooden building with a hitching post out front. Eliza approached slowly, gathering what little courage remained. Before she could reach the door, it swung open, and a tall man stepped out. He was lean and sun-bronzed, with dark hair that brushed his shoulders and a face that spoke of hard years on the frontier. He wore a dusty black hat, a faded blue shirt, and trail-worn denim. A gun belt hung low on his hips. His eyes, sharp and alert, found her immediately, taking in her bruised face and unsteady gait. "Can I help you, madam?" he asked, his voice deep and cautious. Eliza opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. The world tilted sideways, and she felt herself falling. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was the man lunging forward to catch her. When Eliza regained consciousness, she was lying on a narrow cot in a small room. The walls were rough-hewn timber, and sunlight streamed through a single window. For a moment, panic seized her. Was she back with Victor? Had he found her? "Easy now," came a gentle voice. "You're safe." She turned her head to see the man from outside sitting at a desk nearby. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes not from age, but from squinting against the western sun. A tin star was pinned to his shirt. "Sheriff's office," he explained, seeing her confusion. "I'm Ben Calloway." Eliza tried to sit up, wincing at the pain in her ribs. Ben moved quickly to help her, his touch careful and impersonal. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse. She looked down and saw the letter still clutched in her hand, crumpled and stained. "I'm Eliza Montgomery. I came to find my sister Jane." Ben's expression softened with sympathy. "I'm sorry, Miss Montgomery. Jane passed during the fever last winter." "The driver told me," Eliza said, tears threatening. I had nowhere else to go," Ben nodded, pulling a chair closer to the cot. "Your sister was well liked here. She helped nurse folks during the outbreak, right until she took sick herself." He hesitated. "Miss Montgomery, those bruises, are you in some kind of trouble?" Eliza's hand went instinctively to her face. I left my husband in Denver." Ben's eyes narrowed slightly. "Did he do that to you?" She nodded, shame washing over her. "Victor Hargrove, he's a businessman with connections. When I tried to leave before, he found me, said next time he'd kill me." Ben's jaw tightened. "No man has the right to treat a woman that way." "The law says otherwise," Eliza replied bitterly. "He's my husband." "Not in my town," Ben said firmly. He gestured to the letter in her hand. "What's that?" Eliza smoothed the crumpled paper. "Jane's last letter to me. She wrote about her life here, her little homestead. She said if I ever needed a place." Her voice broke. "May I?" Ben asked, extending his hand. Eliza hesitated, then handed him the letter. Ben read it silently, his expression thoughtful. When he finished, he looked up at her. "Your sister's place is still standing. Nobody's claimed it since she passed. By rights, it should be yours now." Hope flickered in Eliza's chest. "Truly," Ben nodded, handing the letter back. "It's not much, a small cabin and a few acres, but it's private, well away from town." He paused. "If your husband comes looking, it would be the first place he'd check." The hope dimmed as quickly as it had risen. "He'll come," she whispered. "He always does." Ben studied her for a long moment. "Miss Montgomery, I'll be straight with you. This is a small town. Word travels fast. If you stay here, folks will talk. Some might even send word to Denver, not meaning harm, but just passing news along." Eliza's shoulders slumped. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. "But," Ben continued, "if anyone asks, I can say you're a widow passing through, give folks a different name, buy you some time to decide what to do next." "Why would you help me?" Eliza asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. Men didn't offer help without expecting something in return. Victor had taught her that lesson well. "Because your sister saved my deputy's life during the fever," Ben said simply. "And because no woman deserves what's been done to you." For the first time in months, Eliza felt something other than fear, a tiny spark of hope. "There's a room at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house," Ben said, rising from his chair. "She's a good woman, discreet. You can stay there while you recover, decide what to do about your sister's place." "I have very little money," Eliza admitted. "Mrs. Patterson needs help with cooking and cleaning. I'm sure you can work something out." Ben reached for his hat. "I'll take you there now if you're able to walk." Eliza nodded, gathering her strength. As she stood, she noticed Ben watching her carefully, ready to catch her if she fell again. His consideration, so different from Victor's cruelty, brought tears to her eyes. "Thank you, Sheriff Calloway," she said softly. "Ben," he corrected her. "Just Ben." The walk to Mrs. Patterson's boarding house was mercifully short. The elderly widow took one look at Eliza's battered face and ushered her inside without questions, shooting Ben a knowing glance. "Second room at the top of the stairs," she told Eliza. "Got its own lock." "Supper's at 6, but I'll bring something up for you tonight so you can rest." As Eliza climbed the stairs, she heard Mrs. Patterson speaking quietly to Ben. "Another one, Sheriff." "She's Jane Montgomery's sister," Ben replied. "Came looking for family. Poor child. Well, she's safe here." Eliza closed the door to her room and leaned against it, exhaustion overwhelming her. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to truly breathe. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, washstand, and chair by the window. It was the most beautiful place she had seen in months because it was safe. She crossed to the window and looked out at Redemption Creek. The sun was setting, painting the dusty street and wooden buildings in gold. A few people moved about, finishing their day's business. In the distance, she could see mountains rising purple against the sky. Was it possible she could find peace here? A new beginning? Or was she merely delaying the inevitable moment when Victor would find her? Eliza touched her bruised face, wincing at the tenderness. One thing was certain: she couldn't run anymore. Whether Redemption Creek became her sanctuary or her final stand, this was where her journey ended. "God help me," she whispered to the setting sun. Dawn arrived with the scent of coffee and bacon wafting up the stairs. Eliza had slept fitfully, haunted by dreams of Victor finding her. She rose stiffly, her body aching from both the bruises and the long stagecoach journey. The small mirror above the washstand revealed that the swelling around her eye had decreased, but the bruises had darkened to a vivid purple. After washing and dressing in her spare gown, a faded green cotton that had seen better days, she made her way downstairs. The boarding house dining room was empty except for Mrs. Patterson, who was setting out plates. "Good morning, dear," the older woman said warmly. "Sit, eat. You're nothing but skin and bones." Eliza sat gratefully as Mrs. Patterson placed a plate before her: eggs, bacon, and biscuits with gravy. Her stomach rumbled at the sight. "Thank you," she said. "I'm happy to help with the dishes after." "No rush," Mrs. Patterson replied, pouring coffee. "Most of my boarders have already eaten and gone to work. Just Mr. Jenkins left, and he's old as the hills and deaf as a post, so don't worry about him hearing your business." As if on cue, an elderly man shuffled in, nodded vaguely in their direction, and took a seat at the far end of the table. He began eating without a word, seemingly lost in his own thoughts. Mrs. Patterson sat across from Eliza. "Sheriff told me a bit about your situation. Not details, mind you, just that you're Jane's sister and you've had some trouble." Eliza tensed. "I don't want to bring problems to your door." "Honey, I've been running this boarding house for 30 years, seen all kinds of trouble come and go." Mrs. Patterson leaned forward. "Your sister was good to this town, now the town can be good to you." Tears pricked at Eliza's eyes. "Thank you." Mrs. Patterson patted her hand. "Eat now. Then we'll talk about how you can earn your keep here until you're back on your feet." Eliza ate slowly, savoring each bite. It had been days since she'd had a proper meal. As she was finishing, the front door opened and Ben stepped in, removing his hat. "Morning, Mrs. Patterson," he said, then nodded to Eliza. "Miss Montgomery, how are you feeling today?" "Better, thank you," Eliza replied, suddenly self-conscious about her appearance. "Sheriff, you eaten?" Mrs. Patterson asked. "Yes, madam. Just came to see if Miss Montgomery felt up to a ride out to her sister's place today." Eliza's heart quickened. "I would like that very much." "Good. I've got some business out that way. Thought you might want to see the property, gather anything of your sister's you might want to keep." Mrs. Patterson nodded approvingly. "That's thoughtful of you, Sheriff. I'll pack some lunch for you both." Despite her protests, Eliza found herself an hour later seated in Ben's wagon, a basket of food at her feet and a borrowed shawl around her shoulders. The day was clear and warm, the Colorado sky an endless blue above them. "It's about a half-hour ride," Ben explained as they left town. "Your sister chose a good spot near water, protected from the winter winds by that ridge to the north." "Jane always was practical," Eliza said softly. "Even as children, she was the sensible one." Ben glanced at her. "How long since you'd seen her?" 3 years. Since I married Victor." The name tasted bitter on her tongue. "He didn't approve of my country relations, as he called them." Ben's hands tightened on the reins. "Men like that, they start by cutting you off from family, makes it easier to control you." Eliza looked at him in surprise. "You sound like you've seen it before." "My mother," Ben said simply. "My father wasn't much of a man, more fists than words." "I'm sorry," Eliza said, truly meaning it. Ben shrugged. "It was a long time ago, but it taught me to recognize the signs." He hesitated. "If you don't mind my asking, how did you get away?" Eliza stared at the passing landscape, rolling grasslands dotted with wildflowers, the mountains a constant presence on the horizon. "Victor had a business dinner. I was supposed to play the perfect wife." Her voice became distant. "But I spilled wine on one of his associates' wives. It was an accident, but afterward, when everyone had gone." She couldn't continue. "You don't have to tell me," Ben said quietly. "No, I want to." Eliza took a deep breath. "When he finished, I thought he might have killed me. He went to his study to drink like he always did after. I took what money I could find, packed a small bag, and ran. The stagecoach was leaving at dawn. I climbed aboard and didn't look back." They rode in silence for a while, the rhythmic clop of the horses' hooves and the creak of the wagon the only sounds. "You're brave," Ben finally said. Eliza laughed bitterly. "Brave? I lived in fear for 3 years before I found the courage to leave." "Some never find it at all," Ben replied. "Some die waiting for things to change." The simple truth of his words struck Eliza deeply. Perhaps there was a kind of courage in her desperate flight after all. "There it is," Ben said, pointing ahead. Eliza followed his gaze to a small cabin nestled against a stand of pines. A creek glittered nearby, and a small corral stood empty beside a lean-to barn. It was humble but neat, exactly the sort of place Jane would have made for herself. As they approached, Eliza felt a strange mix of grief and homecoming. This was where her sister had lived her last days, where she had built a life for herself far from Denver's society. Ben helped her down from the wagon, his hand strong and steady. "Take your time," he said. "I've got some fences to check on the Wilkins place next door." "I'll be back in a couple of hours." Eliza nodded gratefully, needing this moment alone with her sister's memory. Ben climbed back into the wagon and with a tip of his hat, drove off toward a distant homestead. The cabin door was secured with a simple latch. Inside, dust motes danced in the beams of sunlight that streamed through the windows. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a small table, 2 chairs, a cast iron stove, and a rocking chair near the hearth. A doorway led to a tiny bedroom. Everything was just as Jane had left it, dishes stacked neatly on shelves, a half-finished piece of knitting in a basket beside the rocker, a Bible on the table. Eliza moved through the space slowly, touching objects, feeling the lingering presence of her sister. In the bedroom, Jane's clothes hung from pegs on the wall. Her hairbrush lay on a small table, still containing a few strands of hair the same chestnut brown as Eliza's own. The bed was made with a colorful quilt that Eliza recognized. They had sewn it together as girls. Grief overwhelmed her suddenly, and she sank onto the bed, clutching the quilt to her chest. "Oh, Jane," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry I didn't come sooner. I'm so sorry I wasn't here." She cried until no more tears would come, releasing years of pent-up sorrow for her sister, for her lost innocence, for the woman she had once been before Victor had broken her spirit piece by piece. When the tears finally subsided, Eliza felt emptied out but somehow lighter. She rose and continued exploring the cabin, finding Jane's journal in a drawer beside the bed. She sat in the rocking chair and began to read, losing herself in her sister's words, her descriptions of daily life on the frontier, her hopes and dreams. "I have chosen freedom over comfort," Jane had written, "the open sky over fancy parlors, hard work over idle gossip, and I have never been happier." Eliza closed the journal, her heart full. Jane had found happiness here in this simple place. Perhaps she could too. The sound of approaching hoofbeats roused her from her thoughts. She moved to the window, expecting to see Ben returning. Instead, a different rider approached a young man on a dappled gray horse. He reined in at the cabin and dismounted. Eliza tensed, her hand going to her bruised face. Should she hide? Run? A knock came at the door. "Hello, anyone home?" The voice was young, unthreatening. Still, Eliza approached cautiously. "Who is it?" she called. Billy Thomas, madam. I help Sheriff Calloway sometimes. He asked me to check on you, make sure everything's all right. Eliza cracked the door open. The boy standing there couldn't have been more than 16, freckle-faced and gangly. Sheriff got called back to town, Billy explained. Said to tell you he's sorry, but there was trouble at the saloon. Asked if I could escort you back to Mrs. Patterson's when you're ready. Relief flooded through Eliza. Thank you, Billy. I'll be a while yet. Would you like some water while you wait? The boy nodded eagerly, and Eliza found herself smiling for the first time in days. She filled a cup from the bucket Jane had left by the stove, still half full after all these months, and handed it to him. Sheriff said you're Miss Montgomery's sister, Billy said after drinking deeply. Yes, I'm Eliza. She was real nice, your sister. Taught me some reading last year when I had to stay in town while Pa was laid up. Eliza's heart warmed at this small connection to Jane. That sounds like her. She always loved books. Billy glanced around the cabin. Nobody's touched anything since she passed. Sheriff made sure of that. Said it wasn't right for folks to come picking through before family had a chance. That was kind of him. Sheriff Calloway's the best, Billy said with the absolute conviction of youth. Fairest man I ever met. Eliza spent the next hour gathering a few of Jane's belongings: the journal, the hairbrush, a cameo brooch she recognized as their mother's, and a few pieces of clothing that might fit her. She wrapped everything in the quilt, creating a bundle that Billy insisted on carrying to his horse. I can ride double with you, madam, he offered, or I can walk and lead the horse if you'd prefer. Walking would be nice, Eliza said, wanting to stretch her legs and see more of the surrounding land. As they made their way back toward town, Billy kept up a steady stream of cheerful conversation, telling her about life in Redemption Creek, the people, the seasonal rhythms. Eliza found herself relaxing in his company, asking questions about the town and its inhabitants. And Sheriff Calloway, she ventured finally. Has he been sheriff long? 5 years now, Billy replied. Came here from Texas after the war, was a ranger there, I heard. He's not married? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Billy shook his head. No, madam. There was talk of him and the schoolteacher, Miss Wilson, a while back, but nothing came of it. He gave her a sidelong glance. Folks say he's married to his job. By the time they reached Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, the sun was setting. Eliza thanked Billy for his escort and watched as he rode off toward the sheriff's office to report that she had returned safely. Mrs. Patterson met her at the door. There you are, dear. Supper's almost ready. And Sheriff Calloway stopped by, said to tell you he'd come by tomorrow if that's agreeable. Eliza nodded, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. The emotional toll of visiting Jane's cabin had drained her completely. Is everything all right at the saloon? She asked. Billy mentioned there was trouble. Mrs. Patterson clucked her tongue. Just the usual Saturday night foolishness. Some cowboys in from the Henderson ranch got to drinking and arguing. Sheriff sorted it out. That night, Eliza dreamed of the cabin by the creek. In her dream, she was sitting in the rocking chair watching the sunset through the window. She felt peaceful, content, safe. Then a shadow fell across the doorway Victor, his face twisted with rage. She woke with a start, her heart pounding, the peaceful feeling shattered. She lay awake until dawn, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the boarding house, wondering if she dared to hope for a new beginning, or if she was merely delaying the inevitable moment when her past would catch up to her. Sunday morning brought church bells ringing across Redemption Creek. Eliza hesitated at the top of the stairs, listening to the other boarders preparing to attend services. Her bruises were still visible, though fading to yellow-green around the edges. The thought of facing the curious stares of the entire town made her stomach clench with anxiety. Mrs. Patterson appeared at the bottom of the stairs, dressed in her Sunday best, a navy blue dress with a lace collar and a small hat perched on her gray hair. Coming to services, dear? She called up. Eliza touched her bruised face. I think perhaps I should wait until I'm more presentable. Understanding filled Mrs. Patterson's kind eyes. "Of course. There's fresh coffee in the kitchen, and I left some bread and preserves for you." "Thank you," Eliza said gratefully. Once the house had emptied, Eliza made her way downstairs. The quiet was comforting. She poured herself coffee and settled at the kitchen table with Jane's journal, losing herself in her sister's words. A knock at the back door startled her. Through the window, she could see Ben standing on the porch, hat in hand. He wasn't dressed for church, but wore his usual working clothes, though perhaps a cleaner shirt than yesterday. Eliza crossed to the door and opened it. "Sheriff Calloway, Miss Montgomery," he nodded politely. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all. Would you like some coffee?" Ben accepted the invitation, ducking his head as he entered the kitchen. He seemed too large for the domestic space, his broad shoulders and tall frame making Mrs. Patterson's furniture appear doll-sized. "Not attending church today?" Eliza asked as she poured him coffee. "I generally don't," Ben admitted. "I find my peace in other places." He took the offered cup. "How are you finding Jane's cabin?" "It's lovely," Eliza said, resuming her seat. "Simple, but exactly what she would have wanted." Ben nodded. She seemed content there. Came to town for supplies once a week. Always had a kind word for everyone. "Billy Thomas told me she taught him to read." A smile touched Ben's lips. She helped several of the ranch hands' children, had a way of making learning seem like an adventure rather than a chore. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their coffee. Eliza found herself studying Ben's face, the strong lines of his jaw, the small scar above his right eyebrow, the way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when he spoke of Jane. "Have you decided what you'll do?" he asked finally. "About the cabin," Eliza traced the rim of her cup with one finger. "I've been thinking about it. Part of me wants to stay to be close to Jane's memory." She hesitated. "But I'm afraid." "Of your husband finding you?" "Yes." She met his gaze directly. "How long do you think I have before word reaches Denver?" Ben considered the question seriously. "Hard to say. Few weeks, maybe less. Depends who passes through, who writes letters east. And when he comes," if Ben corrected, "if he comes, you'll have warning. Stage only runs twice a week." "Any stranger in town gets noticed." Eliza nodded, but doubt clouded her expression. "Victor is persistent, and he has resources. He could hire someone local to find me." "Then we'll deal with that if it happens," Ben said firmly. "In the meantime, you need rest healing." His eyes traveled to her bruised face, his expression hardening. "And time to decide what you want." "What I want," Eliza repeated, as if the concept was foreign to her. "Yes, Miss Montgomery, what you want, not what you're running from, but what you're running toward." The distinction struck Eliza deeply. For so long, her thoughts had been consumed by escape, by fear. She hadn't dared to think beyond survival. "I don't know," she admitted softly. "It's been so long since anyone asked me that." Ben's eyes softened. "Then that's your first task. Figure out what Eliza Montgomery wants." The way he said her name, with respect and a hint of something warmer, sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. She looked down at her coffee, suddenly self-conscious. "I should let you get back to your reading," Ben said, rising from the table. "I just wanted to check that you got back safely yesterday. Billy can be a bit enthusiastic in his escort duties." Eliza smiled. "He was a perfect gentleman." Ben returned her smile, and for a moment, something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits. Then he placed his hat back on his head and moved toward the door. "Sheriff," Eliza called after him. When he turned, she continued, Would you show me more of the area around Jane's cabin sometime? I'd like to understand why she chose that place." Ben's expression warmed. "I'd be happy to, Miss Montgomery. Perhaps tomorrow, if the weather holds." After he left, Eliza returned to Jane's journal, but her thoughts kept drifting to Ben Calloway, his quiet strength, his kindness, the way he spoke to her as if her opinions mattered. It had been so long since a man had treated her with such respect that it felt almost foreign. She knew she shouldn't let her guard down, shouldn't trust so easily. But something about Ben made her want to believe that not all men were like Victor. That perhaps, in this small frontier town, she might find not only sanctuary but also healing. The next few days fell into a pattern. Eliza helped Mrs. Patterson with the boarding house chores in the mornings, cooking, cleaning, mending. In the afternoons, Ben would often appear with some reason to take her around town or out to Jane's cabin. He introduced her to the townspeople simply as Jane Montgomery's sister, offering no further explanation for her presence or her fading bruises. Most accepted this without question, though Eliza caught the occasional curious glance or whispered comment. Small towns had long memories and sharp eyes, but the people of Redemption Creek seemed willing to give her the benefit of the doubt. Dr. Howard, the town physician, stopped by the boarding house ostensibly to pay a social call on Mrs. Patterson, but Eliza suspected Ben had asked him to check on her injuries. The doctor was kind but direct, examining her ribs and prescribing a tonic for her lingering pain. "You're healing well," he assured her. "Another week or two and the visible marks will be gone." "Thank you," Eliza said, knowing they both understood the invisible marks would take much longer to fade. On Thursday afternoon, Ben took her to see Jane's gravesite in the small cemetery behind the church. The marker was simple, a wooden cross with Jane's name, dates, and the words, "Beloved friend to all." "Reverend Walsh said a beautiful service for her," Ben told her as Eliza knelt to place wildflowers on the grave. "Half the town came, even with the fear of fever still in the air." Eliza traced her sister's name on the marker. "She deserved better than this," she whispered. "She lived the life she chose," Ben replied gently. Not many can say that. As they walked back to town, Ben seemed unusually pensive. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Miss Montgomery, there's something I should tell you." Eliza's heart sank. Had word come from Denver? Had Victor discovered her whereabouts? "A letter came yesterday on the stage," Ben continued. "From Denver," her steps faltered. "Victor?" "No," Ben said quickly. "It was addressed to me from a Marshall Jenkins in Denver. He's an old friend from my Ranger days." "What did it say?" Eliza asked, though she feared she knew the answer. "That Victor Hargrove is offering a substantial reward for information about his missing wife. He's claiming you're unwell, that you wandered off in a state of confusion." Bile rose in Eliza's throat. "That's a lie. He knows exactly why I left." "I know," Ben said firmly. "Jenkins included a personal note, said Hargrove has a reputation that you're not the first wife to try to leave him." Eliza stopped walking, stunned. "The first wife? What happened to her?" Ben's expression was grim. "She disappeared 3 years ago." Her family tried to file a report, but Hargrove said she'd run off with another man. Without evidence, the authorities couldn't do anything. Horror washed over Eliza. She'd known Victor was capable of violence, but murder? Had he killed his first wife? Would she have been next? "Jenkins is discreet," Ben assured her. "He won't reveal your location, but Hargrove has money connections. He's hired Pinkerton detectives." Eliza wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm day. "How long do I have?" Hard to say. "But we need to decide what to do when he comes." "When, not if," Eliza noted bleakly. Ben nodded. "Men like Hargrove don't give up easily, especially when their pride is wounded." They resumed walking, slower now, each lost in thought. "I could leave," Eliza said finally. "Go further west, maybe California." "You could," Ben agreed. "But running means always looking over your shoulder, and he has the resources to keep searching." "What other choice do I have?" Desperation edged her voice. "I can't fight him. The law is on his side. He's my husband." Ben stopped, turning to face her. "What if he wasn't?" "What? What if you weren't legally his wife anymore?" Eliza stared at him in confusion. "Divorce, that's nearly impossible, especially for a woman, and even if I could, it would take months, years even." "There's another way," Ben said, his voice hesitant. "In frontier territories, abandonment can be grounds for annulment. If a husband leaves for more than a year without support or contact, the marriage can be dissolved. But I left him, not the other way around. Ben's eyes met hers, steady and serious. Not if there are witnesses who saw him leave you, understanding dawned. You're suggesting I lie? I'm suggesting we create a story that gives you legal protection, Ben corrected. If people believe you've been here longer than you have, if they believe Hargrove abandoned you, who would testify to that? People who care about justice more than technicalities. Mrs. Patterson, Dr. Howard, Reverend Walsh, perhaps? Eliza shook her head, overwhelmed. Why would they do that for a stranger? Because Jane was their friend, because what's happening to you isn't right. Ben hesitated. And because I'd ask them to. The simple declaration hung in the air between them. Eliza studied his face, searching for ulterior motives, for the catch that must surely come with such an offer. Why are you helping me? She asked, the question that had been on her mind since the first day. Ben looked away toward the distant mountains. I told you about my mother. What I didn't tell you is that she died from my father's beatings when I was 14. No one interfered. No one helped. His voice was steady, but held an undercurrent of old pain. I won't stand by and watch it happen again. Eliza's heart ached for the boy he had been, for the man shaped by such tragedy. She touched his arm gently. I'm sorry, Ben. He covered her hand with his own, the brief contact sending warmth through her. Think about it. We have some time yet. That night, Eliza lay awake long after the boarding house had gone quiet. Ben's plan was risky. If discovered, those who helped her could face legal consequences. And even if successful, would it truly stop Victor? A man willing to hunt her across states, perhaps even to kill, wouldn't be deterred by legal technicalities. Yet the alternative, running forever, always looking over her shoulder, seemed equally impossible. And deep in her heart, a small voice whispered that she was tired of running, tired of fear ruling her life. Dawn was breaking when Eliza finally made her decision. She would stay and fight, not just for herself, but for the woman Victor's first wife had been, for her sister Jane, who had chosen freedom, for Ben's mother, who had never escaped. She would reclaim her life, whatever the cost. When Ben came by the boarding house later that morning, Eliza was waiting on the porch. One look at her face told him she had reached a decision. I'll do it, she said without preamble, but I won't ask others to lie for me. Ben nodded, understanding her reluctance. Let me worry about that part. First, we need to establish you at Jane's cabin, make it look like you've been living there for some time. When do we start? Today, if you're ready. Eliza squared her shoulders. I'm ready. They spent the day at Jane's cabin, cleaning away months of dust and neglect. Ben repaired the corral fence while Eliza scrubbed floors and beat rugs. By sunset, the small homestead looked lived in again, as if someone had been caring for it all along. It needs a few feminine touches, Eliza said, surveying their work. Curtains, perhaps, some flowers. Mrs. Patterson might have fabric you could use, Ben suggested. And there's a widow outside town, Mrs. Donnelly, who keeps a garden. She'd likely share some starts with you. Eliza nodded, already planning. I'll need supplies from the general store and seeds for a vegetable garden. Ben smiled, pleased to see her thinking of the future. Make a list. We'll go tomorrow. As they prepared to leave, Eliza paused in the doorway, looking back at the cabin that was to become her home, her sanctuary, or her battleground, depending on what the future held. It won't be easy, Ben warned, reading her thoughts. Living out here alone. I won't be alone, Eliza replied. I'll have Jane's memory, and, she hesitated, and I'll have friends in town. The word friends seemed inadequate for what Ben had become to her in the short time she'd known him, but she wasn't ready to examine those feelings too closely. Not yet. Yes, Ben agreed softly. You will. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Eliza moved into Jane's cabin, bringing with her the few possessions she'd acquired since arriving in Redemption Creek, mostly donated items from Mrs. Patterson and other kind-hearted townspeople who believed she was merely reclaiming her sister's homestead. Ben visited daily, always with some practical reason, bringing supplies, helping with repairs, teaching her to use the rifle Jane had kept for protection. But as the days passed, these visits stretched longer, often ending with them sharing coffee on the porch as the sun set. Eliza learned that Ben had fought for the Union in the war, had served as a Texas Ranger afterward, and had come to Colorado seeking peace after too many years of violence. He spoke little of his past, but sometimes a shadow would cross his face, and she knew he was remembering things he wished to forget. In turn, she told him about her childhood with Jane, about her brief season in Denver society before meeting Victor, about her dreams of becoming a teacher that had been set aside when she married. Ben listened attentively, asking questions that showed genuine interest, never judging her naivety in falling for Victor's charm. He wasn't always cruel, she explained one evening as they sat on the porch. At first, he was attentive, generous. He made me feel special, chosen. That's how men like him operate, Ben said. They show you what you want to see until they have you. When did you become such an expert on bad husbands, Sheriff Calloway? Eliza teased, then immediately regretted it when his expression turned serious. After my mother died, I made it my business to understand men who hurt women, he said. Studied them, tracked them when I was a ranger. They follow patterns like animals. Eliza's smile faded. And Victor, what's his pattern? Ben met her gaze directly. Control, isolation, creating dependency. Making you doubt yourself until his version of reality becomes yours. The accuracy of his assessment sent a chill through Eliza. You make him sound calculating. Men like Hargrove are. The violence isn't about loss of control, it's about asserting it. They sat in silence for a while, watching as twilight deepened into night. Fireflies began to appear in the meadow, their tiny lights blinking on and off like earthbound stars. It's beautiful here, Eliza said softly. I can see why Jane loved it. Ben's gaze remained on her profile. Yes, he agreed, though Eliza had the distinct impression he wasn't talking about the scenery. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then Ben cleared his throat and stood. It's getting late. I should head back to town. Eliza walked him to his horse, a sense of reluctance slowing her steps. Thank you for the firewood and the company. Ben mounted, looking down at her from the saddle. Lock the door behind me and keep the rifle close. I will, she smiled. Same time tomorrow, maybe earlier. I have something to show you. As she watched him ride away, Eliza acknowledged the truth she'd been avoiding. She was falling in love with Ben Calloway. It was too soon, too complicated, perhaps even dangerous given her situation. Yet she couldn't deny the way her heart lightened when he was near, the sense of safety and possibility he brought to her world. Inside the cabin, she secured the door and checked the rifle as Ben had taught her. The weight of it was becoming familiar in her hands, though she prayed she'd never need to use it. Violence had ruled too much of her life already. She readied herself for bed, brushing out her hair before the small mirror. The bruises had faded completely now, no outward sign remaining of Victor's cruelty. If only the inner wounds could heal as readily. As she climbed into bed, a noise from outside caught her attention, the soft nicker of a horse. Had Ben returned? She rose, wrapping a shawl around her nightdress, and moved to the window. The moonlight revealed a rider approaching slowly, his figure unfamiliar. Not Ben's broad-shouldered silhouette, but someone slighter, more hesitant. Eliza's heart hammered in her chest. Was this one of Victor's men? She reached for the rifle, her hands trembling slightly as she loaded it according to Ben's instructions. The sound of boots on the porch sent fear shooting through her. Then a soft knock, followed by a young voice. Miss Montgomery, it's Billy Thomas. Sheriff sent me. Relief weakened Eliza's knees. She set the rifle aside and moved to the door. Just a moment, Billy. She lit a lamp before opening the door. Billy stood on the porch, hat in hand, looking anxious. I'm sorry to disturb you, madam, but Sheriff Calloway asked me to come right away. There's been a telegram from Denver. Eliza's blood ran cold. Victor? Billy nodded. Sheriff said to tell you Hargrove's on his way, left Denver 3 days ago. 3 days. The stagecoach took 4 days to reach Redemption Creek from Denver, which meant... He'll be here tomorrow, Eliza whispered. Yes, madam. Sheriff says to pack what you need. He'll be here at first light to take you someplace safe. Where? If Victor's coming to Redemption Creek, he'll search everywhere. Sheriff didn't say, madam, just that he has a plan. Billy shifted nervously. He also said to tell you that you still have a choice. You can run if you want to. He'll give you money, supplies. Eliza shook her head. No, I'm done running. Billy nodded, relief evident in his young face. Sheriff thought you'd say that. He said to tell you he'll be here before dawn. And madam, the boy hesitated. Sheriff Calloway won't let anything happen to you. He gave his word. After Billy left, Eliza moved through the cabin in a daze, gathering the few items she couldn't bear to leave behind: Jane's journal, the family quilt, the small daguerreotype of her parents. Everything else was replaceable. Sleep was impossible. She sat in the rocking chair by the window, watching the stars wheel overhead, thinking about the path that had led her here. Had it really been only a month since she'd fled Denver, bruised and terrified? It felt like a lifetime ago. The woman she had been then, cowed, broken, hopeless, seemed like a stranger now. In her place was someone new, someone who had found her voice again, who had remembered how to hope. Someone who had found, against all odds, a reason to stay and fight rather than flee. That reason had a name: Ben Calloway. The thought of him brought both comfort and anxiety. What was his plan, and would it be enough to save her from Victor? Ben was strong, capable, but Victor was ruthless and had the law on his side. Dawn was still hours away when Eliza heard another rider approaching. She tensed, reaching for the rifle, then relaxed as she recognized Ben's broad-shouldered silhouette in the moonlight. She met him at the door, lamp in hand. You're early. Couldn't sleep, he admitted. You ready? Eliza gestured to her small bag. Yes, though you haven't told me where we're going. Ben stepped inside, removing his hat. In the lamplight, his face looked tired but determined. Somewhere Hargrove won't think to look, but first we need to talk. He sat at the table, motioning for her to join him. When she did, he reached across and took her hands in his. The gesture was unexpected but not unwelcome. Eliza, I've been thinking about this since the telegram came. There's only one sure way to protect you from Hargrove. What's that? Ben's eyes held her steadily. Marry me. Eliza stared at him, certain she had misheard. What? Marry me, Ben repeated. Today, before Hargrove arrives. As your husband, I'd have legal rights Hargrove couldn't easily override. You'd be under my protection in the eyes of the law. Ben, Eliza struggled to find words. I know it's sudden, he interrupted, and I know it's not. It's not how things should be between a man and woman. His grip on her hands tightened slightly. But I promise you, Eliza, it would be in name only. I would never. You would always be safe with me. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. He wasn't offering marriage out of love or desire, but as protection, a shield against Victor's claims. You would do that for me, Eliza whispered. Tie yourself legally to a woman running from her past. I would. Ben's gaze never wavered. And not just because it's the right thing to do. The implication in his words made Eliza's heart beat faster. What other reason could there be? Ben looked down at their joined hands, then back up to her face. Because in the short time I've known you, I've come to care for you. More than I should, perhaps. The simple admission hung in the air between them. Eliza felt tears gathering in her eyes. Ben, you don't have to answer now, he said quickly. Think about it. We have a few hours yet before we need to leave. He released her hands and stood, moving toward the door. I'll check the perimeter, make sure we're alone. Take your time. Alone again, Eliza pressed her hands to her flushed cheeks. Marriage to Ben? The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. She barely knew him, had only just escaped one disastrous marriage. How could she consider entering another so quickly? And yet, Ben wasn't Victor. Everything about him, his gentleness, his respect, his unwavering support spoke of a man who understood the sacred trust between a husband and wife. He had offered marriage as protection, not possession. In name only, he had said, but the way he had looked at her, the careful way he had admitted his feelings. There was potential for more someday if she wanted it. Did she want it? The question resonated in her heart. Despite everything, despite the fear and uncertainty, there was one truth she couldn't deny: she felt more for Ben Calloway than mere gratitude or friendship. When he returned, Eliza was waiting by the door, her decision made. "Yes," she said simply. Ben's expression was guarded. "Yes. I'll marry you." Eliza managed a small smile, for protection and, perhaps for other reasons, in time. The relief and something warmer that flooded Ben's face made her certain she had made the right choice. He took a step toward her, then stopped, as if unsure of his welcome. "Eliza, I promise you won't regret this. I'll be a good husband to you in whatever way you need me to be." "I know you will," she said softly. "I trust you, Ben, more than I've trusted anyone in a very long time." The confession seemed to touch him deeply. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek. The tenderness of the gesture brought tears to Eliza's eyes. "We should go," he said, his voice husky. "Reverend Walsh is expecting us. Now, in the middle of the night." Ben nodded. "I spoke with him yesterday, explained the situation. He agreed to perform the ceremony whenever we arrived, day or night." "Does he know about Victor?" "He knows you're in danger, that this marriage is partly for your protection. The details aren't important to him." Eliza gathered her bag and took one last look around the cabin. "Will we come back here?" "Not right away," Ben said. "I have a place in mind where we can stay until Hargrove gives up and leaves. After that, it's your choice: the cabin, town, wherever you want to make our home." "Our home." The words filled Eliza with a strange mixture of apprehension and hope. She was about to embark on another marriage, this time to a man she barely knew yet trusted implicitly. It was madness by any rational standard, yet it felt right in a way she couldn't explain. The ride to town was conducted in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten as they approached the small white church on the edge of Redemption Creek. Reverend Walsh was waiting at the door, a kind-faced man in his 50s with silver-streaked hair and compassionate eyes. He ushered them inside without comment on the unusual hour or circumstances. The ceremony was brief but dignified. Reverend Walsh spoke of commitment, protection, and mutual respect rather than the traditional vows of obedience. Ben had clearly discussed this with him beforehand, another thoughtful gesture that touched Eliza deeply. When it came time to exchange rings, Ben produced a simple gold band. "It was my mother's," he explained softly. "She would want you to have it." Eliza's fingers trembled as he slipped it onto her hand. She had nothing to give him in return, a fact that distressed her until Ben assured her it wasn't necessary. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Walsh declared. "May God bless this union and keep you both in his care." There was a moment of awkward silence, then Ben leaned forward and placed the gentlest of kisses on Eliza's cheek. "Mrs. Calloway," he whispered, the name a promise and a shield. Reverend Walsh signed the marriage certificate with flourish, then called in his housekeeper, Mrs. Clark, to witness it as well. "It's all legal and binding," he assured them. "No one can separate you now without due process of law." As they left the church, the first rays of sunrise were painting the sky pink and gold. Ben helped Eliza onto his horse, then mounted behind her. The closeness was unfamiliar but not unwelcome, his chest solid against her back, his arms encircling her as he held the reins. "Where to now?" Eliza asked as they rode away from town. "An old hunting cabin in the mountains," Ben replied. "It belongs to a friend who only uses it in the fall. No one will think to look for us there." The ride took most of the morning, climbing steadily into the foothills of the Rockies. The cabin, when they reached it, was rustic but sturdy, a single room with a stone fireplace, rough-hewn table and chairs, and a narrow bed in one corner. Ben busied himself building a fire while Eliza explored their temporary sanctuary. It was basic but clean, with supplies laid in canned goods, flour, coffee, even some books stacked on a shelf. "You planned this," she realized, "before you even asked me to marry you." Ben nodded, not looking up from the fire. "I wanted to be prepared, whatever you decided, and if I had chosen to run instead, then I would have given you money, supplies, and my best horse." He straightened, meeting her gaze. "I meant what I said, Eliza. The choice was always yours." The gravity of what he had done marrying her, risking his reputation and perhaps his career to protect her, suddenly overwhelmed Eliza. Tears welled in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." Ben crossed to her, his expression tender. Hesitantly, he reached out to brush a tear from her cheek. "No need for thanks between husband and wife." The words, so simple yet profound, touched something deep inside Eliza. This man, who had known her so briefly, had given her what Victor never had: respect, choice, safety. In that moment, she knew with certainty that even if their marriage had begun as a means of protection, it had the potential to become much more. But first, they had to survive Victor's arrival in Redemption Creek. "What happens now?" she asked, "when Victor arrives and finds me gone?" Ben moved away, giving her space. "He'll ask questions, search the town. Sheriff's deputies from the county seat are coming to assist officially to help look for a missing woman, unofficially to make sure Hargrove doesn't cause trouble. And if he discovers I was here, he'll learn that Jane Montgomery's sister arrived months ago after being abandoned by her husband, that she recently married the local sheriff and is away on her honeymoon." Ben's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "All true from a certain point of view. Will people really testify to that?" Eliza asked skeptically. "Some will. Mrs. Patterson, Dr. Howard, Reverend Walsh. Others will simply say they don't recall exactly when you arrived, not a lie, given how little attention most folks pay to comings and goings." "And you think that will be enough to make Victor leave?" Ben's expression turned serious. "I don't know, but it will establish reasonable doubt about his claims, and with the county sheriff involved, he'll have to tread carefully." They spent the day settling into the cabin, carefully avoiding discussion of the sleeping arrangements. As evening fell, Ben announced he would take the floor, giving Eliza the bed. "That's not necessary," she protested. "The bed is large enough to share." Ben's face revealed his surprise. "Eliza, I promised this marriage would be in name only. I won't make you uncomfortable." "You won't," she assured him. "I trust you, Ben, and it gets cold in the mountains at night." After a moment's hesitation, Ben nodded. "If you're sure." That night, they lay side by side in the narrow bed, a careful distance between them. Eliza was acutely aware of Ben's presence, the sound of his breathing, the warmth radiating from his body. It was intimate yet innocent, a strange contradiction that somehow encapsulated their entire relationship. "Ben," she whispered into the darkness. Did you mean what you said?" "About caring for me." There was a long pause, then Ben's voice, low and sincere. "Yes, more than I should, considering how little time we've known each other." Eliza turned on her side to face him, though she could barely make out his profile in the dim light from the banked fire. "I feel the same." Ben's breath caught. "Eliza, I know it's too soon," she said quickly. "After everything with Victor, I shouldn't trust my feelings, but being with you, it feels right in a way nothing has in a very long time." Ben's hand found hers in the darkness. "We have time," he said softly. "No need to rush anything. This marriage is real in the eyes of the law, but what it becomes between us, that's for us to decide in our own time." Eliza squeezed his hand gratefully. "Thank you for understanding. Always," Ben promised. With that quiet assurance, Eliza closed her eyes, feeling safer than she had in years, despite the uncertainty that awaited them. Whatever came next, Victor's rage, the town's gossip, the challenges of building a life together, they would face it as partners. Perhaps not yet as true husband and wife in every sense, but as something equally precious friends who cared deeply for one another, bound by trust and growing affection. For the first time since fleeing Denver, Eliza slept without nightmares. They remained at the mountain cabin for 5 days, falling into a comfortable routine that felt surprisingly domestic. Ben hunted and chopped wood. Eliza cooked and kept the cabin tidy. In the evenings, they read aloud from the books on the shelf or simply talked, sharing stories from their past, discovering common ground despite their different backgrounds. On the 6th day, Billy Thomas arrived with news. Victor had indeed come to Redemption Creek, demanding information about his mentally disturbed wife. He had shown a photograph of Eliza, offering rewards for information. "Nobody said nothing about you being here recently," Billy reported proudly. Mrs. Patterson told him Jane Montgomery's sister had been living at the homestead since last fall, that she'd married Sheriff Calloway last month, showed him the marriage certificate and everything. "How did he react?" Ben asked. "He didn't believe it at first. Got real angry," said Mrs. Patterson was lying. That's when Sheriff Mason from the county seat stepped in, told Mr. Hargrove he was disturbing the peace. They had words. Billy's eyes were wide with excitement. "Sheriff Mason told him without proof you were who he claimed, he had no authority to search private property. Said Mr. Hargrove could file a formal complaint if he wanted, but it would take weeks to process." "And," Eliza pressed, "he left this morning," Billy said, "took the stage back toward Denver, but—" The boy hesitated. "What is it, Billy?" Ben prompted. "He said he'd be back. With papers proving you're his wife, Miss Eliza, and lawyers." Ben's jaw tightened. "Did he threaten anyone?" Billy shook his head. "Not directly, but he was real angry, scary-like." After Billy left, Eliza and Ben discussed their options. Victor's departure bought them time, but his promise to return with legal documentation posed a serious threat. "He'll have our marriage investigated," Eliza said. "Find out it only happened days ago, not months." "Possibly," Ben agreed, though frontier record keeping isn't always precise. "Dates can be unclear. Are you suggesting Reverend Walsh would falsify the certificate?" Ben's expression was unreadable. "I'm suggesting that a man of God might recognize a higher justice than the letter of the law. Even so, Victor won't give up easily." "No," Ben agreed. "But neither will we." They returned to Redemption Creek the next day, deciding that hiding would only make them appear guilty. Eliza wore Ben's mother's ring proudly, and they moved into his small house at the edge of town, a modest 2-room structure that nevertheless felt like a palace after the mountain cabin. The town's reception of their marriage was mixed. Some, like Mrs. Patterson and Dr. Howard, embraced the fiction that they had been wed for some time. Others clearly had their doubts, but kept their opinions to themselves out of respect for Ben's position as sheriff. A few, however, were openly suspicious. Agnes Wilson, the schoolteacher rumored to have once set her cap for Ben, was particularly cold toward Eliza, making pointed remarks about hasty arrangements and mysterious pasts. Eliza bore the scrutiny with dignity, focusing on establishing herself as Ben's wife and a member of the community. She helped at the church, assisted Mrs. Patterson with baking for the boarding house, and began putting Jane's cabin in order for eventual use. Through it all, Ben was steadfast. In public, he treated her with respectful affection, offering his arm when they walked together, placing a protective hand at the small of her back when they entered a room. In private, he maintained the careful distance they had established, never presuming, always honoring her boundaries. 2 weeks after their return to town, a letter arrived from Marshal Jenkins in Denver. Ben read it with a grim expression, then handed it to Eliza. "Victor has filed a formal complaint," he summarized. "Claims I've abducted his wife and is demanding an investigation by federal authorities." Eliza's hands trembled as she read the official language. "What does this mean?" "It means we need to strengthen our position," Ben said. "Jenkins has delayed things as much as he can, but eventually someone will come to investigate. How do we strengthen our position?" Ben took her hands in his. By making our marriage real in every way, not just legally but publicly, we need witnesses who can testify to our life together, to our—" He hesitated, affection for one another. Eliza understood his meaning. They needed to be more than a couple who shared a house. They needed to be seen as truly husband and wife. "You're asking me to be more demonstrative in public," she said carefully. Ben nodded. "Only what you're comfortable with. But yes, we need the town to believe without doubt that ours is a love match, not a convenient arrangement." The request was reasonable, even necessary, yet it filled Eliza with both anticipation and anxiety. Since their wedding night, they had maintained a careful distance, sharing meals, conversation, even occasionally brief touches, but nothing that could be mistaken for true intimacy. Now, Ben was asking her to cross that line, if only for appearance's sake. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. "I understand," she said finally, "and I agree." Ben's relief was palpable. "Thank you, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. I know." Eliza hesitated, then added softly, "It's not entirely an act for me, Ben." The admission hung in the air between them, charged with possibility. Ben's eyes darkened, and for a moment, Eliza thought he might close the distance between them, might finally cross the invisible boundary they had established. Instead, he squeezed her hands gently. "Nor for me," he replied, his voice husky. "But there's no rush, Eliza. Whatever happens between us should happen because we both want it, not because circumstances force our hand." His consideration touched her deeply. Victor had never concerned himself with her desires or comfort. He had taken what he wanted when he wanted it. Ben's willingness to wait, to let their relationship develop naturally despite the external pressures, spoke volumes about his character. That evening, they attended a social at the church, a regular gathering of townsfolk for music, food, and conversation. As they entered together, Eliza was acutely aware of the curious glances, the whispered comments behind hands. Ben's arm was steady around her waist. "Ready," he murmured. Eliza nodded, summoning a smile. "Ready." They moved through the crowd together, Ben introducing her proudly as "my wife" to those she hadn't yet met. His hand rarely left her resting at the small of her back, taking her elbow to guide her, occasionally entwining his fingers with hers. The contact was electrifying, especially when he would lean close to whisper something in her ear, his breath warm against her skin. For her part, Eliza found herself responding naturally. She would touch his arm when laughing at something he said, straighten his collar, or brush imaginary lint from his shoulder. Small gestures of intimacy that spoke of comfortable familiarity. When the music began, Ben led her to the cleared space serving as a dance floor. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Calloway?" he asked formally, but with a warmth in his eyes that made her heart skip. "You may, Sheriff," she replied, allowing him to draw her into his arms. The dance was a simple waltz, yet as they moved together, Eliza felt anything but simple. Ben's hand at her waist, the other holding hers, their bodies closer than they had ever been. It awakened sensations she had forgotten could be pleasant. With Victor, physical contact had become something to endure or fear. With Ben, it was something to savor. "You're a fine dancer," he commented, his voice low. "My mother insisted on lessons," Eliza replied. "Said no young lady could make a good match without knowing how to waltz." Ben smiled. "Smart woman." As the evening progressed, Eliza found herself relaxing into their pretense, or was it still pretense? The line between performance and reality was blurring. When Ben brought her punch, their fingers brushed, and the jolt she felt seemed entirely genuine. When she laughed at his dry observations about their neighbors, the warmth in his eyes appeared real. By the time they walked home under a canopy of stars, Eliza was certain of one thing: whatever had begun between them as a marriage of convenience was evolving into something deeper, something true. At their door, Ben paused. "We gave them something to talk about tonight," he said, his voice tinged with satisfaction. "Do you think they believed it?" Eliza asked. That were truly husband and wife, Ben's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. I think we were convincing. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken desire. Then Ben stepped back slightly, creating distance. We should get inside, he said, his voice rougher than usual. It's late. Eliza nodded, unable to hide her disappointment. As she turned to enter the house, Ben caught her hand. Eliza, he said softly. I meant what I said before. When this happens, if it happens, it should be because we both want it, not because we're playing a part for others. I know, she replied, and I appreciate your restraint. It's just what? She met his gaze directly. I'm beginning to wonder if we're being too cautious, if we're denying ourselves something we both want out of fear. Ben's expression softened. Perhaps, but after what you've been through, I'd rather err on the side of caution than risk rushing you into something you're not ready for. His consideration brought tears to Eliza's eyes. How different he was from Victor, who had never once considered her feelings or desires. In that moment, she knew with certainty that what she felt for Ben was no longer gratitude or dependency, but something much deeper. Thank you, she whispered, standing on tiptoe to press a gentle kiss to his cheek. For being the man you are. That night, as they lay in their separate beds on opposite sides of the house's thin dividing wall, Eliza found herself wondering how much longer they would maintain this careful distance. Not much longer, she hoped. Not much longer at all. The next morning brought unexpected news. A telegram arrived from Marshal Jenkins. Victor had withdrawn his complaint and returned to Denver. What does it mean? Eliza asked as Ben read the message aloud. Why would he give up so easily? Ben's expression was troubled. I don't know. It's not like Hargrove to abandon his pursuit, especially after making threats. Could he have believed our story about being married for months? Possibly, or he could be regrouping, planning a different approach. Ben folded the telegram carefully. We should remain vigilant. This may be a temporary retreat, not a surrender. Despite the lingering uncertainty, the news allowed them to breathe easier. As days passed with no further word from Denver, they settled into a comfortable routine. Ben continued his duties as sheriff, while Eliza divided her time between their home in town and Jane's cabin, which she was slowly restoring. Their public displays of affection continued, no longer purely for show, but increasingly genuine expressions of their growing feelings. Ben would kiss her cheek when leaving for work, hold her hand as they walked to church, put his arm around her shoulders during social gatherings. Eliza found herself responding in kind, straightening his collar before he left each morning, bringing him lunch at the sheriff's office, waiting up for him when his duties kept him late. Small, domestic gestures that built a framework of intimacy around them. Yet still, they maintained certain boundaries. Ben never presumed, never rushed her. Their kisses remained chaste, their embraces brief. The promise of more hovered between them, unspoken but increasingly palpable. A month after their hasty wedding, Eliza decided it was time to move forward. She prepared a special dinner at home: venison stew, fresh bread, apple pie for dessert. She wore her best dress, a deep blue that brought out the color of her eyes, and arranged her hair the way Ben had once commented he liked. When he arrived home that evening, his appreciation was evident in his gaze. "What's the occasion?" he asked, hanging his hat by the door. "1 month," Eliza replied, "since we were married." Ben's eyes widened slightly. "I didn't realize. I should have remembered." "It's all right," she assured him. "It's not exactly a traditional anniversary." They ate by lamplight, the conversation flowing easily between them as it always did. Eliza found herself studying Ben's face, the strong lines of his jaw, the crinkles at the corners of his eyes when he smiled, the way his hair curled slightly at his collar. This man was her husband, yet in many ways still a stranger. They had built a life together out of necessity, but it had become something she cherished, something she couldn't imagine abandoning even if the threat from Victor disappeared completely. After dinner, they sat before the fire, a companionable silence between them. Eliza gathered her courage. "Ben," she began, her voice soft but determined, "I've been thinking." He turned to look at her, his expression open. "About us, this marriage," she met his gaze directly. "I think it's time we stopped pretending," Ben's breath caught visibly. "Pretending. That this is only an arrangement of convenience, that we're only husband and wife on paper." Eliza moved closer to him on the small sofa. "I want this to be real, Ben, in every way." The intensity in Ben's eyes made her heart race. "Eliza, are you sure? There's no rush, no obligation." "I'm sure," she said firmly. "I've been sure for weeks. I was just afraid." "Of what?" "Of feeling too much, of being vulnerable again." She reached out, touching his face gently. "But I'm more afraid of wasting time we could have together. Life is uncertain, Ben. We both know that." Ben caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. The gesture, so tender and intimate, sent a shiver through her. "I don't want to replace one cage with another," she continued. "I need you to understand that. I need to be your partner, not your possession." "I would never see you as anything but my equal," Ben said fervently. "You must know that by now." "I do," Eliza assured him. "That's why I'm ready. That's why I trust you with my heart as well as my safety." Ben reached for her then, drawing her into his arms with a gentleness that brought tears to her eyes. His kiss, when it came, was tender yet passionate, a promise, a beginning, a sealing of the bond that had grown between them despite the unusual circumstances of their union. Later, much later, as they lay together in what was now truly their shared bed, Eliza rested her head on Ben's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. "I never thought I could feel this way again," she confessed softly. "After Victor, I thought that part of me was broken forever." Ben's arms tightened around her. "Nothing about you is broken, Eliza. Wounded, perhaps, but healing." "Because of you," she said, lifting her head to look at him, "you showed me what love should be." "Love," Ben repeated, his voice holding a question. Eliza smiled, suddenly shy despite their intimacy. "Yes, love, I love you, Ben Calloway. I think I have since that first day when you read Jane's letter and sat beside me in your office." Ben's face transformed with joy. "I love you too, Eliza. Have from the beginning, though I tried not to." "Thought it was too soon, that you needed time." "We both needed time," she agreed. "But now we have all the time in the world," Ben promised, pulling her close once more, and for a while it seemed true. Summer faded into autumn, and their marriage deepened into a partnership of true affection and respect. Eliza split her time between their home in town and Jane's cabin, which she had transformed into a thriving homestead with a vegetable garden, chickens, and even a milk cow Ben had surprised her with on her birthday. The town's initial curiosity about their hasty wedding had given way to acceptance. Even Agnes Wilson had thawed somewhat, especially after Eliza volunteered to help with the school's Christmas pageant. As winter approached, they discussed their future. Ben admitted he had been saving to buy land outside of town, perhaps build a larger house. "I've always wanted children," he confessed one evening as they sat before the fire. "A family of my own." Eliza's heart warmed at the image, a home filled with children, Ben teaching their sons to fish, herself reading to their daughters by the fire. "I'd like that too," she said softly. "Really?" Ben's face lit with hope. "I wasn't sure after everything. Victor didn't want children," Eliza explained. "Said they were messy, inconvenient, but I always did, and with you," she smiled. "With you, I can imagine it perfectly." They began making plans for the land, for the house, for their future together. The shadow of Victor Hargrove receded further with each passing day, until Eliza could sometimes go an entire week without thinking of him at all. Then, in early December, as the first snows blanketed Redemption Creek, the past came knocking at their door. Eliza was alone in the house, Ben having been called to settle a dispute at one of the outlying ranches. The knock came just after noon sharp, authoritative, unmistakably not Ben's familiar pattern. She approached cautiously, hand instinctively going to the small derringer Ben had insisted she keep nearby. "Who is it, Mrs. Calloway?" came an unfamiliar male voice. "I'm Deputy Marshal Harding. I need to speak with you regarding a legal matter." Eliza's blood ran cold. A marshal? Had Victor renewed his complaint? "May I see some identification?" she called through the door. There was a pause, then the sound of something being slid beneath the door, an official-looking document with a federal seal. It appeared genuine, though Eliza was no expert. Reluctantly, she opened the door. The man standing on her porch wore the star of a U.S. Marshal, tall, middle-aged, with a weathered face and tired eyes. "Mrs. Calloway," he said, touching his hat. "I apologize for disturbing you. Is your husband at home?" "He's out on sheriff's business," Eliza replied, not inviting the man in. "What is this regarding, Marshal?" Harding sighed. "I think you know, madam. Victor Hargrove has filed a new complaint with additional evidence. I've been sent to investigate his claim that you are, in fact, his legal wife." "I am Ben Calloway's wife," Eliza stated firmly. "We've been married for months, so I've been told." Harding's expression was sympathetic, but determined. "Mrs. Calloway, or Mrs. Hargrove, as the case may be, I have a warrant to bring you to Denver for a hearing. Mr. Hargrove has provided documentation of your marriage to him, predating your alleged marriage to Sheriff Calloway." Fear gripped Eliza's heart. "I can't go with you. My husband will be informed of your whereabouts," Harding assured her, "and is welcome to attend the hearing. But I'm afraid I must insist you accompany me. The stage leaves in an hour." "No," Eliza said, backing away. "I won't go back to him." "You don't understand. I understand more than you think, madam," Harding interrupted gently. "Marshal Jenkins sent me specifically because he knows the situation. I'm to ensure your safety and fair treatment, but I cannot ignore a federal warrant." "Please," Eliza begged. "Wait for my husband to return. Let me explain. You can explain in Denver before a judge," Harding said firmly. "I'm sorry, but you must come with me now. Pack what you need for a few days." Seeing no alternative, Eliza retreated to gather her things, mind racing. Ben would return to find her gone, taken by a marshal back to Denver, back to Victor. The thought was unbearable. As she packed a small bag, an idea formed. She quickly wrote a note to Ben, explaining what had happened and begging him to come to Denver. Then, while Harding waited on the porch, she slipped the note to Mrs. Peterson next door, along with Jane's journal containing all the details of Victor's abuse. "Make sure Sheriff Calloway gets these," she whispered urgently. "Tell him I went unwillingly." The journey to Denver was a blur of anxiety and fear. Marshal Harding was professional but distant, offering little conversation beyond basic courtesy. The stagecoach was uncomfortable, the December weather harsh, but Eliza barely noticed. Her thoughts were fixed on what awaited her in Denver. Victor's rage, his punishment for her defiance. And beneath the fear, a deeper dread that her brief happiness with Ben would be revealed as an illusion, a temporary reprieve before reality reasserted itself. They arrived in Denver on the second day, the city's soot-stained buildings and crowded streets a harsh reminder of the life she had fled. Marshal Harding escorted her not to the jail, as she had feared, but to a respectable hotel. "You'll stay here tonight," he explained. "Under guard. The hearing is tomorrow morning." "And my husband?" Eliza asked, meaning Ben. "Has he been notified?" "Mr. Hargrove has been informed of your arrival," Harding replied, misunderstanding deliberately or otherwise. "I meant Sheriff Calloway," Eliza clarified firmly. Harding's expression softened slightly. "A telegram was sent to Redemption Creek, as promised. Whether Sheriff Calloway can make it in time for the hearing is another matter." Left alone in the hotel room, with a female deputy posted outside her door, Eliza sank onto the bed in despair. The hearing was hours away. Even if Ben had received her message immediately and set out at once, he might not arrive in time. She would face Victor alone, with only the truth as her shield. And in a legal system that viewed wives as little more than their husband's property, the truth might not be enough. Sleep eluded her that night. She paced the small room, rehearsing what she would say to the judge, how she would present her case. Dawn found her exhausted but resolved. Whatever happened, she would not return to Victor willingly. She would fight with every ounce of strength she possessed. Marshal Harding collected her at 8 o'clock, escorting her to the courthouse, an imposing stone building in the center of Denver. As they climbed the steps, Eliza's legs trembled beneath her, but she forced herself to stand tall, to show no weakness. The courtroom was nearly empty, just a judge, a clerk, Marshal Harding, and, seated at one of the tables, Victor Hargrove with a well-dressed lawyer beside him. Victor looked much as she remembered, handsome in a cold way, immaculately dressed, his dark hair perfectly styled. When he saw her, his expression shifted briefly, a flash of something dark and possessive crossing his features before he composed himself into a mask of concerned relief. "Eliza," he said, rising, "thank God you're safe." She recoiled from his approach, and Marshal Harding stepped between them. "Please remain seated, Mr. Hargrove. This is a legal proceeding, not a reunion." The judge, an elderly man with steel gray hair and penetrating eyes, called the hearing to order. "This is a most unusual case," he began. "We have two men claiming to be legally married to the same woman. Mr. Hargrove has provided documentation of his marriage to Eliza Montgomery on May 12, 1872. Sheriff Calloway claims to have married the same woman earlier this year. Your Honor," Victor's lawyer interjected smoothly, "my client's wife has been unwell. She suffered a breakdown following the loss of a child last year and fled during a period of mental confusion. Sheriff Calloway has taken advantage of her vulnerable state." "That's a lie," Eliza exclaimed, unable to contain herself. "I was never with child. I fled because Victor nearly beat me to death," the judge frowned. Madam, you will have your chance to speak. For now, please remain silent." Victor's lawyer presented their case first marriage certificate, testimonials from Denver society about their happy union. Even a letter from a doctor suggesting Eliza had suffered a mental break following a miscarriage. When it was Eliza's turn to speak, she told her story plainly: the years of abuse, the final beating that had driven her to flee, her arrival in Redemption Creek, and subsequent marriage to Ben. Her voice shook at times, but she forced herself to continue, to look directly at the judge as she detailed Victor's cruelty. "Where is Sheriff Calloway?" the judge asked when she had finished. "Why is he not here to corroborate your account?" "He was away when Marshal Harding came for me," Eliza explained. "But he knows the truth. Everyone in Redemption Creek knows." The judge looked troubled. "Mrs. Hargrove Calloway," Eliza corrected firmly. "My name is Eliza Calloway." "That remains to be determined," the judge replied. "The documentation provided by Mr. Hargrove is compelling. Without contrary evidence, I must conclude that your marriage to Sheriff Calloway is invalid, as you were already a married woman at the time of that ceremony." Victor smiled smugly, reaching for Eliza's hand across the table. She snatched it away, panic rising in her throat. "Your Honor, please," she begged. "If you send me back with him, he'll kill me. Perhaps not right away, but eventually. I know too much about him now." The judge looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Hargrove, these are serious allegations. Do you have any evidence of this alleged abuse? Witnesses? Medical reports?" "No," Eliza admitted. "Victor was always careful, but my sister knew. Jane Montgomery knew the truth." "And where is your sister now?" "She died last winter in Redemption Creek," the judge sighed. "I sympathize with your situation, but without evidence," the courtroom doors burst open, and Ben strode in, still wearing his trail clothes, dust coating his boots and hat. Behind him came Marshal Jenkins and, surprisingly, Dr. Howard from Redemption Creek. "Your Honor," Ben said, approaching the bench, "I apologize for the interruption. I'm Sheriff Benjamin Calloway, Eliza's husband." The judge frowned. "Sheriff, this is a closed hearing." "I understand, Your Honor, but I have evidence that bears directly on this case." Ben turned to Victor, his expression cold. Evidence about Mr. Hargrove's first wife. Victor paled visibly. What nonsense is this? I've never been married before Eliza. Haven't you? Ben challenged. What about Catherine Wells, the woman you married in St. Louis in 1868? The one who ran off with another man in 1872, just months before you married Eliza? Victor's lawyer leaned close, whispering urgently in his client's ear. Victor brushed him off. This is absurd. I don't know what you're talking about. Ben nodded to Marshal Jenkins, who stepped forward with a folder. Your Honor, these are documents from St. Louis marriage certificate, newspaper announcements, and police reports filed by Catherine Wells's family when she disappeared. They never believed she ran away. They suspected foul play, but could never prove it. The judge accepted the folder, reading through the documents with a deepening frown. Mr. Hargrove, can you explain this? Victor's composure cracked. That woman meant nothing. She was unfaithful, disobedient. She got what she deserved. A shocked silence fell over the courtroom. Victor seemed to realize what he had admitted and quickly backtracked. I mean, she ran away. I never touched her. Just as you never touched Eliza, Ben asked quietly. Never gave her these, he nodded to Doctor Howard, who stepped forward with another document. Your Honor, I'm Dr. James Howard, physician in Redemption Creek. When Mrs. Calloway arrived in our town, I treated her for extensive bruising consistent with a severe beating. I documented her injuries professionally, as is my practice. This is my report with detailed notes and drawings. The judge examined the medical report, his expression hardening. Mr. Hargrove, these allegations are extremely serious. Victor's lawyer tried to regain control. Your Honor, even if these claims were true, which we categorically deny, they don't invalidate the legal marriage between my client and Mrs. Hargrove. Actually, Ben interjected, if Mr. Hargrove was already married to Catherine Wells at the time he wed Eliza, then his marriage to Eliza was never valid to begin with. The judge looked startled, then thoughtful. That is a pertinent point, Sheriff Calloway. For the next hour, the hearing transformed into something closer to a criminal investigation. Marshal Jenkins presented additional evidence about Catherine Wells's disappearance, including testimony from a maid who had witnessed Victor's abuse of his first wife. Through it all, Eliza sat in stunned silence, watching as the carefully constructed facade of Victor's respectability crumbled. She had known he was cruel, controlling, violent, but a murderer. The possibility chilled her to the bone. Finally, the judge called for order. In light of this new evidence, I am referring the matter of Catherine Wells's disappearance to the district attorney for criminal investigation. As for the matter before us today, he turned to Eliza. Mrs. Calloway, it appears your marriage to Mr. Hargrove was never legal, as he was already married at the time of your ceremony. Therefore, your subsequent marriage to Sheriff Calloway is valid and binding. Relief flooded through Eliza. She reached for Ben's hand, clutching it tightly. This is outrageous. Victor exploded, rising from his seat. She is my wife, my property. You can't, Mr. Hargrove, the judge interrupted coldly. I suggest you remain silent before you further incriminate yourself. Marshal Jenkins, please take Mr. Hargrove into custody pending investigation into the disappearance of Catherine Wells. As Jenkins moved to arrest Victor, the man's control finally shattered completely. With a roar of rage, he lunged across the table toward Eliza. You ruined everything. If I can't have you, no one will. Ben moved faster than thought, placing himself between Eliza and Victor. The two men collided, Victor's momentum carrying them both to the floor. There was a brief, violent struggle, then the sharp report of a gunshot. Eliza screamed, certain Ben had been shot. But it was Victor who lay still, blood spreading across his chest. The derringer that had been concealed in his sleeve had discharged during the struggle, the bullet finding its owner instead of its intended target. Physician, the judge called, and doctor. Howard rushed forward, kneeling beside Victor. After a brief examination, he looked up, his expression grim. "He's gone." A heavy silence fell over the courtroom, broken only by Eliza's ragged breathing. Ben rose slowly, returning to her side, his arms encircling her protectively. "It's over," he whispered against her hair. "Truly over now." The aftermath was a blur of statements, paperwork, and legal proceedings. Victor's death was ruled accidental, a case of self-inflicted injury during an attempted assault. The investigation into Catherine Wells's disappearance continued, with Marshal Jenkins promising to see it through to whatever conclusion awaited. 3 days later, Ben and Eliza boarded the stagecoach back to Redemption Creek, exhausted but free, truly free, for the first time since Eliza had fled Denver months before. "Are you all right?" Ben asked softly as the coach pulled away from Denver. "After everything that happened." Eliza considered the question seriously. The revelation of Victor's likely murder of his first wife had shaken her deeply. How close had she come to the same fate? Yet the knowledge also brought a strange relief, confirmation that her fears had been justified, that she had been right to run when she did. "I will be," she answered honestly. "With time, with you." Ben's arm tightened around her shoulders. "We have plenty of both now." As the stagecoach carried them west, toward the mountains and the small town that had become their home, Eliza rested her head on Ben's shoulder, thinking about the strange journey that had brought them together, a bruised woman with a letter, a compassionate lawman who had read it and sat beside her. "Ben," she said softly, thank you for reading Jane's letter that day, for seeing past the bruises to the person beneath." Ben pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Thank you for being brave enough to trust again after everything you'd been through." Eliza smiled, feeling the weight of the past finally beginning to lift. "I think Jane would be pleased with how things turned out. She always wanted me to be happy." "Are you?" Ben asked, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. "Happy?" Eliza turned to look at him, this good, honorable man who had become her protector, her partner, her love. "Yes," she said simply. "More than I ever thought possible." Spring came early to Redemption Creek that year. As the snows melted and the first wildflowers appeared on the prairie, Ben and Eliza broke ground on their new home, a sturdy 2-story house on land not far from Jane's cabin. They would keep both properties, using the cabin as a guest house or perhaps someday a place for their children to play and explore. The town had embraced their return from Denver with relief and celebration. The true story of Victor Hargrove, his abuse, and his mysterious first wife had traveled faster than the stagecoach, transforming Eliza in the eyes of the community from an object of curiosity to a woman of remarkable courage. Even Agnes Wilson had thawed completely, becoming one of Eliza's staunchest supporters and friends. "Takes real grit to survive what you did," she had declared. "This town could use more women with backbone." As the walls of their new home rose against the Colorado sky, Eliza found herself planning for a future that once seemed impossible: gardens to plant, rooms to furnish, children to raise. The nightmares that had plagued her since Denver had gradually faded, replaced by dreams of the life she and Ben were building together. On a warm evening in late April, as they sat on the porch of their partially completed home watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Ben took her hand. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He produced a small velvet box. "I know we're already married, but I thought you deserved this properly." Inside the box was a delicate ring with a small but perfect diamond. "Ben," Eliza breathed, "it's beautiful." "Not as beautiful as you," he replied, sliding the ring onto her finger alongside his mother's gold band. "I want you to have something that's just ours, something untouched by the past." Eliza looked down at the 2 rings, one representing the necessary union that had saved her life, the other symbolizing the love that had grown from that beginning. Together, they told the story of her journey from victim to survivor to beloved wife. "I love you, Ben Calloway," she said, leaning to kiss him. "Thank you for sitting beside me that day." "Best decision I ever made," Ben replied, pulling her close, "and one I'll never regret." As twilight deepened around them, Eliza nestled against her husband's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. The future stretched before them, bright with promise and possibility. Whatever it held, they would face it together, two people who had found in each other not just safety or comfort, but the rare and precious gift of a love born from compassion, nurtured by respect, and destined to last a lifetime. And in that moment, with the first stars appearing overhead and the man she loved beside her, Eliza knew that the bruised, frightened woman who had stepped off the stagecoach clutching her sister's letter was gone forever. In her place stood a woman of strength and purpose, a woman who had discovered her own worth and the courage to claim the happiness she deserved. She was Eliza Calloway now, and this was her redemption.